Hello, Rooted. Well, it's time for our next reason why Jesus came to die, and we're on number 21, which is to reconcile us to God. Romans chapter 5, verse 10 says this: For if, while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more, now that we are reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. Well, the word reconcile means to restore friendly relations between two different parties. And for that to happen, both sides need to change how they view the other side. So when it comes to us and God, on our side, we need to change from being against God to for him. And on God's side, his view of us must change from being righteously angry against us to showing us merciful forgiveness. But how can that happen? How can people like us change from basically not caring at all about God to becoming his faithful children? And how can God simply forgive us and accept us to be in his family, like to welcome us into his house and to honor us? How can that happen? Well, that's what this passage talks about. We're going to break it down into 4 sections, and we'll go through them really quickly. So the first one, the first thing to notice is that it says, while we were enemies. Now, you might not feel like an enemy of God, but you are if you're living like he doesn't exist, or if you just simply don't really care about him at all. Then that is what you are. You are an enemy of God. And the next bit says, we were reconciled. Notice it says that we were enemies and we were reconciled. God is the one doing all of the active work here. He reaches out to us, not us to him. He mends the relationship with us, not us with him. He's the one doing the reconciliation with his enemies. We're not reconciling God to us. That's not how it happens. So back to the question originally. How? How can that happen? How can enemies like us, people who don't care about God, become faithful, loving and adoring children? And how can a God who's angry at our rebellion, angry at our sin, forgive us? How can that happen? Well, it's by the death of his Son. That's the next bit of the verse. So because Jesus was completely perfect and blameless, only his death can pay the price for sin. Because the price for sin is death. So if one who never sinned dies, then death is paid for. That's how the argument goes. One who never sinned dies, which is the price for sin. But he never sinned, but he dies. Then death is paid for, which means your death is paid for. And you will die because you sin, but Jesus has paid for your death already. That's what that bit's saying, by the death of his Son. But there's more. There's one last bit. We know that that's the case because he came back to life again. No one else has ever died and come back to life, not of their own accord. I'm not talking about people that die on the operating table and the doctors revive them. I'm talking about properly smelly dead, for 3 days dead. Jesus brought other people back to life, like Lazarus before he died himself. Jesus has mastery over death because he's the sinless, perfect child, Son of God. And by following him, we can be children of God as well, reconciled to God. We turn from being enemies, we are turned towards, and the bridge that we walk across to get back to our Father is his Son, Jesus. That is reconciliation. And that is number 21 of why Jesus came to die.